me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day. I was down with an illusion, like a sparrow with broken wings. But now I shine with your reflection on me. I'm getting back up on my feet. That you showed up was written in the palm. You are a statement, explode like a bomb. I get to push myself to victory. You make me winner. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. Yes, I'm the winner, yeah. 'Cause I'm the winner, yes. Am I awake or am I dreaming? So far gone, I won't look back. And when I move, there ain't no stopping me. You're pushing me up to the top. I saw the clouds looking angry, but then the sky reached my mind. And when I spaced out, I see the possibilities unfolding the way that I want. That you showed up was written in the palm. You are a statement, explode like a bomb. I get to push myself to victory. You make me winner. You cut me loose and set me free. You cut me loose. You make me win in every way. Win in every way. You show me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way. You show me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. Yes, I'm the winner, yeah. 'Cause I'm the winner, yes. 'Cause I'm the winner, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh, yes, I'm the winner, yeah.
Hello. Hello, everyone who is joining us wherever you are. It looks like we may be having issues on LinkedIn streaming. So I've left a note. Hopefully you're catching us on Twitter. We have some people already joining us live, and I've got Stacey Vanek Smith with me today. I am so excited. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, and thank you for writing this book. It so spoke to me. Like, my heart was just like, oh my goodness, if I had only had it a decade ago, where would I be now?
I felt that way looking at a lot of the research. I was like, I did everything wrong. That's how I felt. But I don't know. I do believe that most of the decisions we make are logical. We're reacting to normal things. So
Yeah, no. And I mean, I fell into every pitfall just like you did. Like you mentioned that in the book, is that like all the things you could possibly do wrong, I did them. I did them too. So, I mean, and that's human. So I do this thing where I allow people to join us like live and hop into the stream, because I have access to LinkedIn Live and Twitter Live. And I think, why do I get to do that and nobody else does? And so I think I should allow other people to do that. And so I've got a bunch of people already lined up to share their thoughts. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to like, I'm going to invite someone and then ask you a question, and maybe they'll ask you a question. Or I'm going to keep it a little bit loose, and we'll just see what happens. So I'm going to add, we've got Heidi Solomon Orlick.
Yay! Hi,
Yay.
Jen.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi,
Heidi actually, she runs as the founder of Girls Who Sell.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So, Heidi, I'm going to allow you to ask a question, but we just got started. So I just want to just find out from Stacey, what made you think of Machiavelli and women in the workplace? Like, how did you get that burst of inspiration? Because, like going through all the challenges I've walked my neighborhood endlessly in the middle of the night strategizing, right? But never made that association between power and Machiavelli, and like how?
Yes, Machiavelli's not the most obvious choice for sort of a champion of women in the workplace, for sure. Machiavelli, actually, that part came second. So the inspiration behind the book originally came from, so I've been a reporter. I've covered for NPR. I've covered business and economics for almost 20 years, which is a lot. But when you've covered the same beat for so long, like you do sometimes the same stories over and over again. And I had covered the gender pay gap. It was like I did it every couple of years. And I was talking with an economist, Francine Blau, who's an amazing economist. She's done a lot of work on the gender pay gap. And she just tossed off this comment in the middle of an interview. She's like, well, these numbers have like barely moved in 20 years. And I was like, 20 years? And so the pay gap is like, for women earn about 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. For Black women, it's 63 cents. For Latina women, it's 54 cents. So it's substantial. And I was like, they haven't moved in 20 years. And meanwhile, I'd been covering the economy this whole time of like all these new companies, Silicon Valley getting so huge, all of, entrepreneurship growing, just all this transformation and movement in our economy. And the fact that was stuck was so strange to me. And then shortly after that, I was doing a piece on the CEO gap. Basically, 80% of CEOs are male, 90% of CEOs are white. For Fortune 500 companies, it's even more extreme, believe it or not. And those numbers have actually gotten worse somehow. And those numbers hadn't moved in 10 years. And I was just like, I don't understand. I knew that women were going to get higher degrees, going to college in higher and higher numbers. More women than men go to college now. Getting like law school degrees, more women than men get law school degrees. Medical school and business school are also becoming more equitable. So I just didn't understand, like, how are these things stuck? And so I was talking this over with my editor, Karen Marcus at Simon & Schuster. And I was just like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, there's a disconnect happening. Like, it's just not logical. Like, you can't be feeding something different into a machine and getting the same thing out the other side for 10 years. I mean, I know there's a lag, but 10 years. And my editor was like, oh, it's almost like women need Machiavelli. And I was like, that's interesting. So I'd read Machiavelli in college, really hated Machiavelli. I thought like this obsession with like power and killing people and everything. And this does not have a very good reputation. But something about that comment just kind of got me thinking a little. And so I just bought a copy of The Prince and read it. And the copy was super short. It's like 50 pages. You can read it in a sitting. So I read it. And like, as soon as I started reading it, all of these lights started going off in my head, because he starts out the book, first of all, for two reasons. One, the beginning of the book is this weird apology. He's like, oh, he writes it to Lorenzo de Medici. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, you probably don't even have time to read this. You're so amazing. And I'm the worst, but like, I have some ideas. I've spent my life gathering them. If you have a couple seconds, maybe take a minute to read this. And I was like, this is Machiavelli? Like, whoa, where's this coming from? And also, the book itself was addressed. He says there are two kinds of princes. There are the inheriting princes who have gotten their kingdom from their dad, essentially. And he's like, those guys have a pretty cushy life. Like, everyone sort of expects them to be in power. They're the heir apparent. People aren't asking a lot of questions. They are the status quo. But then there are the conquering princes. They've newly taken over a land. They've just they're the new rulers. And he said, for them, difficulties abound. People are questioning why they're in power. Like, why am I not in power? What did this guy do? Why should I pay my taxes to him? Why should I follow his laws? And I was like, that is women and other marginalized workers in the workplace. Like, we're all here in the workplace, but our power is getting challenged all the time. Our abilities are getting challenged all the time. We're in the place doing the thing, but to keep our power and to grow it, we're in a little bit of a struggle. So it seemed like a really perfect proxy for me. And I also I just liked the counterintuitiveness of it. That really appealed to me, because you wouldn't think he's not an obvious champion for women, but I really thought it was his advice was so, perfect for women and other marginalized workers in the workplace, people who are traditionally like just on a little bit of a back foot.
Yeah, no, and I 100% agree. When you give the specific examples throughout the book, I'm like, oh my goodness, he knows his stuff, right?
Yes.
And it like just made me think, okay, are there any other authors out there who are old white men who have a perspective that if I apply it to something else, that it's like forever changed? So that's pretty interesting.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I love all that. Believe it or not, I'm a print, my mother actually used to read me that book when I was young. So
Really?
she did.
That's awesome.
Totally did. And so I'm not sure, subconsciously what kind of, I probably have to explore that, what kind of like subconscious impact that had on me, in terms of my drive and, ambition. But but actually the light bulb didn't go off. I had a real aha moment while you were talking, because I didn't really associate it with it. So thank you. But I have a question, because, things, the pay gap is dismal, right? The number of women in C-level and leadership positions remain dismal, right? In sales and otherwise. But regarding power and money, one of the things that I frequently hear from women, particularly young women, but all women in general, is just their the way they relate to money and the way they place value on themselves. So, I think that there's a confidence issue that needs to be addressed. I don't know if you agree. I'd love your perspective on it, because I don't think women in general demand what they're worth.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. In fact, I broke down in the book power because of course Machiavelli is talking about kingdoms, right? But we don't really have tracts of land and gold bullion in the modern workplace. So I looked at 5 ways that power is measured: money, title, confidence was one. And this research around confidence is fascinating, because it seems that it is one of probably the most important predictors of success, of happiness, of all kinds of things in the workplace. And women struggle for it. A lot of women struggle for it. And this affects how much you ask for, what you even hope for. That's the thing, can really get into your head and affect. It's not even just about people telling you no. It's about you not even asking, not even thinking to ask, or asking for less, what you think you can get. Of course, this doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Of course, we all want to be more confident. But it can feel like trying to be cool. I compared it to like in junior high, when I knew that the key to success in junior high was being cool, but knowing that did not help me be cooler. In fact, it like probably was not helpful. Having me be cool.
That's so funny. My kids say that to me all the time. Mom, if you're trying to be cool, you're not cool.
It's the great irony of coolness. Luckily, it's not such a case with confidence. So Dr. Cameron Anderson at Berkeley has done some really cool research about confidence. And although faking confidence is not as effective as having real confidence, it does have some of the same effects. And of course, the reason women aren't as confident is a lot of the messaging we get. It's a lot of messaging from the time you're so like too tiny to even understand what messaging is or what messages you're getting. And so, this stays with us. And even if we become aware of it, which I think a lot of us are, it's not always easy to deal with it. So how do you fake confidence, right? So what do you do that's confident? So one way, and in the book, The Confidence Code, which is a great book, they lay this out a little bit too, which is one way to act. Confident people act. Insecure people waffle. Machiavelli was also big on this. He was like, when in doubt, act. He felt like waffling was one of the biggest mistakes he saw princes make. And it's easy to do, right? Like, it's like, well, maybe I'll just wait and see how things settle out. Machiavelli was big on like, just make a call. Even if it's the wrong call, it's better than not making a call. And confident people will act because confident people aren't so scared of making a mistake. Mm-hmm. Confident people are more resilient. They're better at coming back from mistakes. So they're less freaked out to make them. When you're feeling less confident, it can just be crippling. You just feel like, it can suck all the energy away. So that's one thing. Another way to act confident is to ask for more than you think you can ask for. This is a big one, right? This is hard, but Machiavelli talks about it too. He said a good prince should be like an archer where you aim above the target you want to hit, which I love that image. I always think of it. So you ask for more than you think you can get. That's how you fake confidence. That's another way to fake confidence. So another thing to do is Dr. Cameron Anderson recommended, he's like, surround yourself with people who are confident. And to sort of bring that out in you, because we are, our friends have such amazing influence on us in so many millions of ways. And it can be hard when you're surrounded by people who aren't confident to sort of break out of that shell. Change is hard. Mm-hmm. Changing yourself in that way is hard. There's all kinds of resistance and obstacles. And even people who really love you might not want to see you change. They might feel like your relationship with them might be a little threatened. But try to sort of get that good feedback going, because it's helpful in like, oh yeah, I could ask for that too. You sort of can start taking notes instead of, it creates a positive feedback loop. Oh, the other thing is to take small risks. So, ask for small things, like even, be like, hey, actually, can you fill my coffee all the way up? Or, hey, do you mind holding the door for me while I carry this thing? Or just little thing, oh, hey, I'm not going to be in on Monday until 10. I'm going to need an hour off, or whatever small thing, just like start to kind of flex those muscles. It's a practice. Confidence is a practice.
I love all of that. Amen.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there, right?
I think a lot of
hard. I think the asking for more or shooting higher, the whole concept of the archer is so brilliant, right? And I was actually just working with a young woman who was renegotiating her salary with, at her company. And I asked her to do that. I'm like, okay, well, what do you really want? And then advise her to ask for about $20,000 higher than what she was asking for. And she was terrified. She was practicing in the mirror and she was rehearsing what she was going to ask for and how she was going to overcome objectives. She spent a whole weekend before that meeting with her boss. But guess what? She actually got what she asked for, even the higher amount than what she wanted. So she was like,
oh, that's
awesome. Now
it's so tricky too when you're a woman, because often if you ask for more, the reaction you get is not positive. That's like how to ask too becomes tricky. It's not as, it can be, you can create a bad feedback loop, because you can like be like, okay, and you work yourself up and you ask for more. And then it's like, well, who do you think you are? You can't have that. And so that can be a tricky thing too as a woman. Which is
and being judged.
Sometimes you get punished.
Judged and punished for that. Yeah, no, we actually had a question that came up too. So how do you manage that? How do you manage that balance between asking for more and then knowing that if you ask for too much, you're going to be judged or create resentment or, create those bad feelings? How do you manage that?
Yeah, that is one of the central things I looked at in the book, because sorry, I'm realizing I've been let this like like sun, right, sitting right in the sun. Because on the one hand, like women do get punished for asking in certain ways. Women who ask for more money in a job negotiation are automatically considered to be less desirable to work with. Like that does not happen with men. There can be a sort of, who do you think you are? Like, wow, she's kind of selfish. These are the feelings that come up with people inside of people, and they don't mean for them to. This is what can be so insidious about dealing with discrimination. It's not like people are meaning to discriminate. In fact, most of the time they think they're just being fair. It's like, wow, she's kind of selfish. So one way around that, there are sort of several ways to deal with this. One way to deal with this is to ask in a way that is not antagonistic. It's sort of a we together approach. So what you want to avoid typically as a woman in a negotiation is any kind of adversarial, mano a mano, high noon, standoff type situation. Because women tend to be regarded very that is a situation where often you will be punished. If not in that moment, in that negotiation, then later when people are like, oh, she's kind of cranky, I don't want to put her in charge of this project or whatever. So one way to deal with that, but that's hard, right? Because you're in a negotiation. Negotiations seem to be mano a mano face-offs, but they don't have to be. One thing you can do is to create like a picture of a future with this company, say like, listen, I'm so thrilled to be here. Or if it's a new job, I'm so excited at the prospect of working here. I think what you guys do is so cool. I think I could be a really big part of that. I see the ways that I could contribute. I'm so excited. I've done a lot of market research. I know that the salary range for this job is between, $80,000 and $90,000. I know that I have a higher end of experience in that range, and I know that my output tends to be really high. So I think a salary of $90,000 is fair. What do you think? So you're kind of like, here's the vision I have of us together. Also, the market research is key. Homework is just key for women because then it's like, oh, she's not just like grabbing a maximum amount of money for herself, which is just, it's not fair. I don't mean to like say that it's fair that this is what goes through people's heads, but it's what often will go through people's heads. So it's like, oh, it's market research. It's just facts. Like, listen, this is just what this work pays. So I just want to make sure I'm getting paid fairly. It's a different thing than like, I need to be getting $90,000.
I have so many issues with what you just said.
Yeah, please. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lydia.
That's Lydia. Hi.
Hi. I haven't seen you in a while.
No.
That is a typical female logic and going into a salary negotiation or any kind of a negotiation. I think you have to be a guy. Guys have no problem just saying, this is what I'm worth, whether they're qualified. And even when they're not totally qualified for the job, women feel like they have to go over and above the qualifications to get the job. And then, saying, I'm so excited and you're doing such great work. It's like, by the time you finish saying that, they're going to say, well, how much do you want to pay us for the privilege of working with us? Seriously, you have to come in, you have to pull on your big girl panties and your big boy panties over those and come in with quiet confidence, faking it till you make it if you need to, and say, this is how much I'm worth. I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm just I'm pitching, and I'm starting to pitch to investors a new startup, and I'm dealing with this confidence issue because I'm an older female non-technical founder. Need to get over that. But I think back to the late 90s, .com 1.0, and a friend asked me to go to a job fair at Javits with her because she was looking for a job. I just lost my job. I just been fired actually from a job. And I wasn't looking for a job. And I was just talking to people. And this company, this startup that was hiring said, oh, would you like a job? I'm like, sure, and I said, as long as I can define my title. which, people were coming up with crazy job titles. And ultimately, I got the job. I went in, I got $30,000 more than I had ever been paid before. And it was a great learning experience, and lasted until, .com 1.0 imploded. And then I went into business for myself. But I think you really, and maybe it's because Heidi knows this, and been there, done that. I've been in sales. I've been shit on every which way you can count by men and women. And you just have to ignore that voice in your head, and you have to be a guy.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I disagree with being a guy. I think you need to just be a woman.
Thank you.
It drives me crazy when people say you have to be a
working.
guy, because I think you can leverage your innate personality and skill sets as a woman.
Yeah.
And I actually love your approach, Stacey. But I think
Yeah,
having
no.
the facts is super, super important. Not to get, like,
I'm not,
Lydia,
I'm not saying be a bro.
Everyone's going to have their own perspective on this topic, and everyone brings their own unique experience to this topic, right?
Yeah.
What's worked for them, what's not worked for them, their particular journey. And that comes from everything from your education, where you grew up, to your family dynamic, all the things that are part of it, right? I'm a 45-year-old woman, and I have different experiences than Lydia. And for me, going in and saying, hey, I'm really grateful for the opportunity is part of my DNA of just expressing gratitude, right? An attitude of gratitude. In some ways that's hurt me. In some ways it's helped me. But Lydia, thanks so much for posing the question. I'm going to...
I would love to address it too, because I think this is such an important issue. And it really points to like a line that I think can be so tricky, where you are, basically it addresses this thing called the double bind, which shows up a lot for women in the workplace. And the double bind it has to do with sort of unconscious biases, unconscious associations that people have with women and with leaders. And what people want to see women out of women, even women, they have Harvard website has some really cool tests you can take to see what your biases are. But it's like compassion, self-deprecating, supportive, nurturing. The qualities people want to see in a leader are don't care too much what other people think, strong, opinionated, assertive. And so as a woman, you're in this like almost impossible bind where, like, if you display a lot of feminine qualities, expressing gratitude being a feminine quality, people will be like, we love her, she's the best. We're never going to put her in a leadership position. If you express a lot of leadership qualities, you're assertive, you're aggressive, people will say like, oh yeah, we'll put her in a leadership position, but people often won't like you. And that can have real effects later in your career. This happens with female politicians all the time, where it's like you can get to a certain point, but not past a certain point. This is, I think, what keeps a lot of women out of CEO positions, because it's like you will get put into a leadership position, but sometimes you can get held back later. And Lydia in tech getting venture capital, I think 98% of venture capital goes to men. It is a tough, you are trying to get money from people. You are presenting yourself as a leader. And you do have to come off as competent. You can't be apologizing or equivocating too much. And so there is a tricky line. I did present sort of like more of a gratitude-y type approach where it's like, I'm so excited for this opportunity, but I think there are ways to do it that don't undermine you as a leader, where you can say, listen, I'm very excited at the prospect of working with you. Here's what I know. And I think one thing
why I think I'm worth it, right? Like not only is this what the market pays for this job, but this is my accomplishment and why I believe I'm valued at that. Would you agree with that, Stacey?
Oh yeah. I think the one thing that is just a universal, I think it's good for anyone negotiating, but I think especially important for women is just having facts, to do as much homework as you can, and just to know, like, listen, this is what this position pays. And And, some of the advice that I got for women in negotiation was a little different than than the conventional wisdom. For instance, it's conventional wisdom not to name a number first in a negotiation, right? I mean, you're never supposed to do that because you could leave money on the table. But a couple of the people that I talked with, including Dr. Linda Babcock, was a couple of really awesome negotiating books. She's out of Carnegie Mellon. But she did the study that found that like women ask for raises 1 time for every 5 times a man asks for a raise. But then, of course, the reasons for that get really complicated. She said one of her students called her and said, "You're on the radio, you're on the radio. Your research is," and Rush Limbaugh was talking about her research, saying, "Well, this is why there's a pay gap, because women aren't asking for more." And she said she's like, "I wanted to put my head in an oven." But there are real reasons, that women, that the reaction to a woman being assertive is just different, or can be different. I think that is changing. So I think it can get, this is where it gets tricky, but I think having facts, like just, and Linda Babcock recommended naming your number first. And so did Claire Wasserman with Ladies Get Paid. You go in and you don't because otherwise often the discussion, this has definitely happened to me, will get anchored way low. So, and then like coming back from that can be hard. So you're just, so you anchor it out but you say, "Listen, I've done a lot of market research. I know that, this position tends to pay," or like, "I've done a lot of research into how much, venture capital startups typically need. I'm going to need between $1 and $2 million or whatever. How does that sound to you?" And it's that way it's like less, I mean, that still is less confrontational, right? It's like, "I've done research. This isn't about you and me. And like, I get more and you get less." Because that's where negotiations can get tricky, right? It's like a zero-sum game. It's like, if you pay me more, you have less. And so you're kind of trying to shift it away from that. But no, I appreciate that. I mean, it's an uncomfortable thing to negotiate as a woman, and you do have to walk that, or you don't have to, but I think it can be helpful to, you're often in a bind, and it can be helpful to kind of try to negotiate that line in a way that's comfortable for you, that feels like, and is appropriate to your line of work and what you're negotiating for.
And what is considered assertive and confident in a man is considered aggressive and annoying in a woman, and maybe that's not somebody you want to work with.
There was an amazing study a woman, Dr. Cecilia Ridgway out of Stanford, did, where she had 2 actors and she had them both they were applying for a job, reading a script as if they were applying for a job. And she had a female and a male actor, and they both read the same script in front of like people taking a study at college students. And the people thought the man was wonderful. They're like, "Oh, he seems so cool. I want to work with him." And the woman who read the same script, they thought she was arrogant. They thought they wouldn't want to work with her. They thought she'd be difficult. They thought she'd be a bad leader, which was just, I mean, to me, that's probably one of the studies that stuck with me the most of all of them that I looked at for the book, because to me, that is exactly the issue, right? It's like, you can say the same things as a man and it'll go south, but like, also, what are you supposed to do? Like, are you not ever supposed to ask for a raise? Or are you supposed to ask in, some sort of equivocating way? It's tricky, but yes, you're absolutely right. And I loved that study. I thought it was brilliant.
It's amazing.
It's easy to become angry.
Oh my
And
God.
you mentioned this in the book, right?
I do that all the time.
Angry.
You get angry, like looking at the research for this. And I was like, yes, I got angry all the time. I was like simultaneously relieved, because I was like, a lot of it's like a lot of the experiences I had, I'm like, oh, this isn't just me. It's like, this is sort of, having the data was sort of comforting, but it also was sometimes kind of distressing.
Well, Lydia and Heidi, thank you for asking the questions. I'm gonna
those are great questions. You're getting your funding. Woohoo!
Yay, go Lydia.
Go Lydia.
It's a big deal.
So I mean,
that move the needle and change, like, entrepreneurs like that.
I mean, and it's hard, right? I wrote a LinkedIn article recently about just finally feeling like I'm at a place where I could be myself, and what a world of difference that makes, that I could just be myself all the time without having to strategize and think through every word I'm saying and how I'm saying it.
It's
It is
exhausting.
exhausting.
And it takes, I mean, this is the thing that a couple people have pointed out. They're like, all like, I read your book, but like all this effort, all this thought, all this strategy, like this seems like a lot of time and energy to be putting in to not my actual job. And that's true. It's exhausting. I mean, and it's not your actual job. It's not producing the thing you want to produce. It's like getting to a point where you can produce the thing you want to produce. And it's not fair. It's exhausting.
No, it is exhausting. But and that's why I was sort of, I don't know, there was a point in my life where I determined that I decide what success is, right, for me.
Yeah.
And to chart my journey based on what I want it to be, rather than sort of this idea of society or what people think is what my journey should look like. And that really helped me. But when I read your book, I think back to how many years I spent sort of angry looking back at like what I should have done in that moment, could have done, the evaluation. And so where I think you bring a lot of value with the book, with just sort of these insights of different actionable ways of just moving forward.
I think that, I mean, that anger, like that really resonates with me too. I feel like I've spent a lot of time being angry at myself for not negotiating more, for knowing I was paid less and tolerating it, for all kinds of things like that. I think it's easy to be I felt like I've been angry at myself and sort of blamed myself. And it can become a tricky situation and a not good situation.
Well, yeah. And you can beat yourself up. I mean, how do you manage your mental health while going through all of this, working? And if you're a mom or have kids, or if you're a single mom, if you've got other things going on, it's a lot, right? And so you would think we would be at a different place in our society as a whole. How do we get to a better place? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do we get to a place where people can be themselves everywhere in the workforce?
Well, I mean, I think that's right. I think there is the mental health issue. It's huge. And I think especially for women, for people of color, for other marginalized workers, it can be just exhausting because you're trying to like do your work and just juggle all of these things and these expectations. And like you said, these measures for success, which don't always fit, I mean, one thing that I thought a lot about it's just, you can get onto some kind of a corporate ladder or some kind of a ladder, and it can become all about that measure of success. And one of my favorite pieces of advice actually was from Dr. Linda Babcock at Carnegie Mellon. And she said, before you go into negotiation, you should think of 10 different things you want, money, title, work flexibility, a conference you want to go to, another assistant, all the kinds of things that will help you be better at your job. And what I loved about that was when I did it myself was that it did make me think about my job differently. I was like, oh, well, what do I want? Not just like, I must get paid more, but like, oh, well, what kind of title do I want? It's like you think more holistically about your job. And I think then you can kind of craft a job that works better for you, where you get the support you need, and not just monetarily, but like through assistance, through equipment, or space, lab space, whatever it is. And I really loved that approach. I thought it was like very powerful. And I think right now, especially because there's a workers like we're not supposed to say there's a worker shortage, but companies really need their workers. And I think because of the pandemic, one silver lining to this horrible couple of years we've been through is that companies are more open to flexible situations, and they're more open-minded. And that's been probably the biggest thing keeping women out of the workforce and keeping their pay lower, is just this lack of flexibility. So I think this is a moment where you can kind of dream a little bit and craft a working situation that'll work for you, and like what your measure of success will be. And I think that's pretty extraordinary. I think we're in a pretty extraordinary moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very grateful that even though, the pandemic is awful, it's terrible, from a career perspective, I'm in a better position now than when it all started. And
Workers have a lot of
grateful for
power
that.
right now. Workers have a lot of
And,
power.
It makes a huge opportunity for women. And so recognizing that life is too short to like not be in a place where you're running into all of these challenges. Like, I spent a few years angry. Like, it is so not worth it to spend years angry.
Oh, it's horrible.
Like, let
Same.
it go.
Same.
Yeah. And
yeah, or just in
you know,
situations where I was unhappy, but like I felt trapped. I felt trapped. I was
yeah,
like, well, I can't
trapped.
change the situation, so I guess I'll just knuckle under. Like, terrible.
Or work harder, right?
Or work harder. I'll just keep doing the same thing, but more.
I'm going to outwork. I'm going to outwork everyone else. And I've tried to outwork everybody else.
Me too. That's a bad path. Like to
it's not, don't,
it's not fun.
Don't.
It really sucks.
For anyone joining us, this didn't actually stream to LinkedIn, so I'm going to have to repost it, but it did go to Twitter and YouTube. If one thing you take away from this is, do not ever try to outwork anyone else. If you're not, that's not going to get you in a better position. If they don't see you for who you are.
Well, I think that's a really common reaction. I mean, it certainly was mine in the beginning. I was like, oh, I'll just hard work my way around the glass ceiling. It's just like, I'm just going to prove. And, obviously hard work is valuable, and producing great work it's why we're all doing what we do, that and paying the bills, of course. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a trap a lot of people fall into, because there's a woman, Stephanie K. Johnson at University of Colorado Boulder, who studies discrimination. And she said a lot of women will deny discrimination or, sexual harassment. And she's like, and when I talk to them, they've totally experienced it. But she said there's something that can be unempowering about saying that a situation is discrimination, because if it's just that you're not working hard enough, well, you can control that, right? I'll just work harder. I'll just make more widgets, whatever I need to do. But if the issue is my manager's just never going to promote a woman, where does that leave you? It takes all your power away. So I think there's often a temptation to say, well, it's not discriminate. I just need to work harder. And you can run yourself in circles. But it's also it's tricky to be like, okay, my manager's never going to promote a woman. What do I do now? Then that is not an easy place to be either. I think this is where a lot of us start out. And Machiavelli was big on looking at the situation you're in clearly, be really honest with yourself, see what's in front of you. It's hard to see. But once you see it, then it can be like, okay, my manager doesn't like to promote women. Okay, what are my options here? How do I move forward? It can be empowering, but it can feel unempowering too.
Well, yeah, it's hard to take that hard look at what is really going on. I mean,
very hard.
I count on so many mentors and my little personal board of directors of, look, I have this challenge and this is how I see it. Let me tell you all the variables. Do you see it the same way, or is it,
Right. And you don't want to be saying something's discrimination if really you just need to step up, right? I feel like I always think well, I don't want to just assume that my manager won't promote women. What can I do to be better? There's always that. And you don't want to be that person.
The thing is, and I think so many women fall into that, right? That we think it must be us. If I work harder, or if I do this, or if I change, what can I do better in this moment or in the coming moments that's going to change the outcome, as opposed to taking a hard look and going, maybe this just isn't for me.
Well, my favorite piece of advice about this particular conundrum, because I do think it's very real. It's hard to sometimes see. It's well, maybe I'm just not working hard enough, or maybe I'm not being the leader I should. It came from Neha Narkhede, who's a Silicon Valley unicorn. She founded this company called Confluent, which is worth $4 billion. She's amazing, but she also worked her way up at LinkedIn. So she also did sort of the corporate ladder thing. And her solution to this, because she said she saw like the landscape for women in tech. She was from India. She grew up in India. She said when she came to the US, it was just striking how women just fell away at every time she moved up a level in tech, like fewer women and fewer women. So what her trick was, it's so simple and it's brilliant, is if she would ask for something, she said she would never be afraid of being told no. So she'd be like, hey, I'd like to be a senior manager. And she would expect her boss to be like, no, I'm sorry, we just don't think you're prepared for that. She'd be like, okay, what would you need to see from me exactly to make that happen? And she would get a list of things, like not just, well, we need your leadership skills developed. Great. How would you like to see that manifest itself? Like, get specifics. And then she would leave. She would do all the things on the list. And then she would go back to her manager and be like, okay, I did all the things. Time to make me senior manager. She said about 80% of the time it worked because you've now succeeded on terms they laid out. But she said sometimes it didn't. 20% of the time she said she would get a like, oh, well, we actually need to see this and this from you. And she said when that happened, she knew she had to go, that this was not a glass ceiling. This was, in her words, a concrete ceiling, and she just needed to go somewhere else. So I thought that was a really brilliant way of sort of assessing. And then she said, you hear valuable feedback too. People will be like, well, I don't know, like, you don't seem to lead your team well. There seems to be a lot of confusion. Like, that's really good information. It's like, oh, I need to be more organized. Okay, that I can do. But it helps you kind of suss out the discrimination from actual feedback or shortcomings or development that you need to do, which can be really crucial for moving ahead. And I thought that was the most elegant, brilliant solution.
No, I love that too. That's amazing. All right. I think we really went over time already.
And did we? I'm sorry. I could talk and talk. This
this was such a good conversation, and I am so grateful that you agreed to join me. Like I said, I was listening and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is someone I really want to talk to, and reached out, and I was grateful you accepted to come and join me. Even though we did not go live on LinkedIn, I will post the video and hopefully the audience will get a lot of value out of it. But I know I did. Like, I think your insights are just amazing. You had one comparison in the book, which made me laugh, to Game of Thrones, that, Khaleesi goes through the whole thing and she's like the dragons and she's conquering everything and she throws it all up. And by the end, they've made her nothing,
Oh my gosh. I really had a bone to pick with that show because they had all these like amazing women who were like in these power positions ready to take the throne. And they all sort of fell apart and it went to a white guy from a good family. It was very distressing, especially Khaleesi.
Yeah.
The woman walked through fire, rode dragons, but like her boyfriend broke up with her and she was like, she lost her mind and that was it. It was really upsetting.
Right? You watched? No, I was right there with you. I cried. I remember watching in that moment, crying, going, they just broke her. They brought her all this way to break her, and that,
because of her stupid cousin boyfriend who was just like, yeah, it's not really working for me. And then she was like, and started murdering everyone. And yeah, I mean, we don't need that. We don't need those messages out there. Come on, Game of Thrones.
Well, again, thank you so much. Thank you for writing this. I think it's definitely that modern playbook for the workplace. Definitely. So, like, if I could have, again, read it 10 years ago, I think things would have been different. Though I'm happy with where my journey ended up anyway, where I've long to go. So
yes, we're all just in the middle of it. But thank you. It means a lot to me that that this spoke to you. And I really want to thank the great questions and thank you for having me. It's been such an honor. So I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's going to be a minute until I do another LinkedIn, Twitter live, go live again, because it's sort of the end of the year. So it's probably going to be next year. I've got someone going to come on to talk about TikTok and how to use TikTok for sales. So that's going to be pretty fun.
God save us all.
And yeah, right.
from TikTok.
Yeah, someone just put hashtag Game of Thrones spoilers. If you haven't watched Game of Thrones,
Oh, I'm really sorry.
but I think everyone.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know. Like, if you haven't, I don't know. If after hearing this, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones, I don't know that you should if you're a woman. I'm just saying. Even though I enjoyed it.
I mean, the first season, yeah, no, I mean, it was troubling on a number of levels. Although I was a devoted watcher.
I was too.
I mean, you know, I really loved Khaleesi.
I did too. I was like, she's got that's it. She's gonna win the game. She's gonna win. I had no doubt.
She had dragons. She had 3 dragons.
Like, how could you go wrong?
Or at least if she's gonna lose, she should have lost to the Ice King. Like, I
Right?
respected the Ice King. Like, he was a terrible person, but like he, you know,
He's badass.
yeah, he was. He was leading an army. He had his own frozen dragon. So now I'm really going into the spoilers. I'm sorry. I'm just going to stop talking now.
Again, thank you so much, and
Thank you for
really
having me.
appreciate it. Take care.